Welcome to Guy Code, a podcast dedicated to imparting dad wisdom to my son, with your host, Koji Steven Sakai, and friends.
Welcome. This is Koji, and this is episode number, I just wrote this down, 41. I wanted to impart all of my wisdom to my son, but of course my son already thinks he knows more than me. So instead of trying to tell him now and having it go in one ear and out the other ear, I decided to record them here with the hope that maybe, just maybe in the future, when he's ready, he'll listen to this advice and not make the same stupid mistakes I made. I'll also bring on guests to impart their wisdom as well, and I have no doubt that their wisdom will be better than mine. This week, I brought on actor and friend Morley Nelson. Morley, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Morley, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I was a theater major in college, and I was told by my advisor at the time that I did not have a face for theater. So I started.
Wait, what does that mean?
Apparently, it wasn't. I don't remember his exact words, but it was something along the lines of a traditional European look.
Oh, okay.
And so he said, you're not gonna. He went in this long explanation about how, Shakespeare and Gilbert and Sullivan, and they wrote for Europeans. So even I think he got into Othello, and he's like, they just didn't write for someone that looks anything other than traditional European. So, and then I think to add insult to injury, he's like, you did really well in lighting class, and very few actors do well in lighting class. So you should think about a career in lighting. And it's just like, it's not, I'm glad people love lighting. I'm not an electrician. I'm not good at that stuff. Even being part Asian, I'm not good at math. So, at that point I figured, I wanted to be an actor because at that point in my life was something that really ignited the fires inside me of creativity, right? I really want to do it. But on top of that, I'm sure as well, your feelings as well. It's just, how many shows, how many heroes do you see that look like us?
Yeah.
Right. You just don't. We just don't exist. I can think about, I think there was like the Jackie Chan cartoon way back in the 90s or whatever.
Yeah.
It was like the closest thing they got. But, I grew up being told I couldn't be, any of the Star Wars characters. I couldn't be any of the Marvel characters. I couldn't be any of the Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or whatever.
Oh, no,
right?
there's a Asian girl in Harry Potter.
That's true. It's true. Yeah.
And Harry had a
Cho
crush on her.
Chang, right?
Yeah.
Cho Chang, but I didn't really want to be Cho Chang. So I wanted to be Harry, right? But so that was a large part of it, was I wanted to be someone like a Keanu or someone where, so I could get past the self-hating and the wanting to be something else, right? Like you grow up very in this kind of shamed culture, like because you're not white, you're less than, or you don't see yourself in someone else, and it's tough. No matter how, like I have great parents, and very supportive, and knowing my multiple cultures was important to them to teach to me, but peer pressure sucks, right? Like you want to be accepted. So I think it hurts as a parent to see your child going through that. And I could see that growing up. So that was, that drove me to want to be an actor. When I was told I couldn't be, or I shouldn't be, right away my gears clicked to, well, there's the two fields that interest me are acting, and then for similar reasons, I grew up in a 96 to 98% white state. So I wanted to be the change that I wanted to see. So I thought, if I can't play a cop, I'll be a cop, right? So I applied and I became a police officer. I was a cop for 12 years. I spent 2 years in the State Detectives Bureau. And ended up, there was some ups and downs being in a police department that was predominantly also 98% white, serving a community that was about 20 to 30% not white. That was also a big challenge. And then so
are you also your dad, right?
Yes, I have a 7-year-old boy and a 2-year-old daughter.
Okay. You're twice dad.
What's that?
You're twice dad. You're dad
Yes.
twice. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Very lucky.
so that's perfect. I'd love to hear some advice you have for not just my kid, but all kids and your kids. And what's your first piece of advice you'd have?
I think the first piece is always, you know, I guess do the best you can with what you have at the time, right? Like always strive to do best, and you will naturally better yourself. And that's not to say you're constantly killing yourself to be the best, but when you're striving to be the best at everything that you're doing, at some point, even when you're exhausted, still try to do the best you can, even though you're exhausted, right? And I think if you get in that habit, um, you know, you are well prepared for when something unexpected or dire happens in your life. You're able to, like much like a boxer who practices every day about, when you get knocked down, you bounce right back up. So if you get knocked down, it's almost not more than a habit. It's an instinct now. You pop right back up.
Yeah.
And I think if you're doing the best you can with what you have, and it also comes from seeing a lot of situations where people that have typically had nothing in their lives and had lived very difficult lives, they still do, they make bad decisions, sure. Some of them make great decisions, but if they're doing the best they can with what they have in that situation, you can't really fault them for anything, real, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're starving and your kids don't have food and you have to steal some bread, like Les Miserables, the whole theme of Les Miserables, can you really blame someone for that as a human being? So I think that's part of it. And
I love that piece of advice. It's actually funny because one of my favorite podcasts I listen to is called Imagined Life. And it's this podcast where they tell stories of famous people and basically how they became famous. And what's really interesting about the podcast is that every story is like they come from some tragic background, like divorce, or the mom died, or they're like super poor, or they're, and it's crazy because almost every single story was like that. But it's interesting because there's two paths, right? For those people, there's like a path where you give up and you just let it kill you, right? Or whatever, like it brings you down, and for those who are super successful, it makes you like bigger. It it makes you like stronger. Like, I mean, like, oh my goodness, what's his name from the Tesla dude?
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. Like, I'm listening to a story about him, and like he got kicked down a flight of stairs because other kids were picking on him. Like, I mean, and he could have just been lying. He was super weird. He'd like stare and off into space for like 30 minutes. but like but people, he fought through that and he became really successful. I mean, he's making a ton of money and changing the world, whatever people think of him. But like it's really interesting that you bring that up. And the other story that I wanted to tell is that my son does jujitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I remember one of the things I've been teaching him is like, you need to fight the people that you think you're going to lose to, and not fight the people you're going to win, because fighting people you're going to win is just, you don't have to try, because you can always beat them. But fighting people you could lose to, that means you got to try as hard as you can, and with the skills you have currently, like you're saying, and you're probably going to lose, but that's okay, because that's what you want. You're looking for that loss because that's going to make you a better fighter at the end of the day,
Right. Yeah, you have to challenge yourself, right? I mean, in everything, I think. At least that's worked for me. And I guess that kind of blends into the second piece of advice is that, in a roundabout way. I'm going to backtrack. Okay. When you're talking about how like the podcast you're listening to, where a lot of people, they came from hard circumstances where a parent dies or whatever. That's like the theme of every Disney cartoon, right?
Yeah.
Like that a parent dies in the first 5 minutes, right? Or 11 minutes. 11 minutes, the parent dies. Which one? I don't know. But it seems like, because either, like you said, either you're gonna turn out just needing therapy for life, or you're gonna succeed and strive to do something fantastic. You know, it's kind of the seed for a hero's journey, right?
Yeah.
So, but I guess the second piece of advice would be, read a lot, read everything that you can, because I think in reading a lot, it will help you determine what's good writing and what's bad writing. And what that allows you to do, in a sense, is kind of conditions you to be able to see what is truth and what is not true, right? Like, constantly work your brain, read as much as possible, whatever interests you. And I think a lot of fiction as well, because I think one key element of good fiction is that it opens your mind up to empathizing with other human beings, right?
Yeah.
Like from other situations that may not be your own. And it also opens your mind into thinking about other things.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason I say that is I also believe in all strong mind, strong body. So read a lot, always. And then also there has to be some kind of physical aspect, like you said, your son in jiu-jitsu. I think, you look at every culture on earth that has produced the perfect warrior for surviving, and you look at it's like, you have the samurai, you have the Greeks, you have the Vikings, they all believed in strong mind, strong body, right? And some sense of spirituality or self-actualization, right? And I think that all goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
So certainly you don't have. Yeah.
Are you a reader? Do you love reading? What's your favorite book, or what do you like to read?
I like a lot of pictures. So no, I'm kidding. Yeah, right now it's a lot of Dave Pilkey, so Captain Underpants, Dog Man. They're like,
Well, you have a 7-year-old. That makes
staples.
sense.
Okay. Right. So if I have to ever read another fart joke in my life, it'll be too soon. But
Dog Man.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like the #1 selling graphic novel in America. Like always is some kind of Dog Man. But I love it because it's part dog, part cop, right? So, but anyhow, it depends. Like I like reading a lot of procedurals. I like reading whatever I'm in the mood for. It's kind of I guess essentially the entertainment. I see it as more entertainment. So if I just got done reading procedural, like say Caleb Carr, something set like the turn of the century, serial killers, whatever. The next book I might want to read might be a Joe Nesbo book, where it's modern day, drunk cop in Scandinavia. Yeah, Scandinavia. Exactly. So so Scandi. I like a lot of Scandi, I guess. I like there is some. I got into. I was a minor, like I think I was a double minor in Asian studies, because I was so desperate to be seen as Asian in college.
Yeah.
Because I'm mixed, and I did so much Eastern reading, and then of course, you can only take so much before you feel like a pebble in the sand in the beach, right? Yeah. So then, like any normal American, I got into anime and manga, right? Like so, sorry, manga, and I enjoy that as well. And I think in America, it's not seen as like I think a lot of people still see it as like comic books or whatever, and don't give it its due. But that's if you read something like by like the original Ghost in the Shell, right? That's some pretty hardcore philosophy. And he's got notes on the sides and in the margins about transdimensional engineering. That stuff's pretty heavy. So it's not just
that's why I never thought it was going to make a good movie.
Right.
This was a hard graphic novel.
Too heady, right? Right. But one of the greatest anime of all time, though, too, right?
Well, it's like Watchmen. I mean, Watchmen's like one of the greatest graphic novels of all time, and it's a tough movie. I mean, I like the movie; it's fine, but the graphic novel is it's not even close.
No, nothing beats. And I think that's always the problem with adaptations. Like, I understand why Hollywood makes a ton of adaptations, because they don't have to do as much marketing and save on marketing dollars, blah blah blah. But nothing ever beats your own imagination, right? I mean, I think
general rule is that if it's a good book, it'll make a bad movie. If it's a bad book, it'll make a good movie. Because the thing is, when you have a good book, the screenwriter naturally, I think, tries to do too much. They try to bring everything into the story. Whereas if it's because the fans will get mad, oh, you didn't have this character, or he didn't do this. Whereas if you have a bad book, nobody cares. Nobody's like, you fuck this up. You're just trying to tell a good story based on that book. So things like Mario Puzo's Godfathers, it's a terrible book, but it's an amazing movie. Obviously, it's because the screenwriter took the essence of that book and then created their own stuff out of that book, as opposed to the other way around. Good books are really hard, but although I think Frank Miller, Dark Knight was done pretty well. The
Yes.
Dark Knight movies was
Yeah.
pretty close to the Dark Knight books.
I think, and who was it that did the Sin City? Sin City was maybe too close. Like,
Yeah,
I
they
guess
did.
that's,
Yeah, too
yeah,
much
like, yeah, like I think I could have done with less prosthetic face makeup and
Yeah,
more. I want to see more of the actual, like, I
story.
know you have a film with him right now, but I want to see him like Mickey Rourke's face. Like, I want to see him acting. Like, I didn't want to see Marv, that could have been anybody, right?
Yeah.
Like, so a testament to his acting, he did a good job as Marv, but still, I would have liked to see more Mickey than Marv,
Sure.
right? And Marv come through him. But yeah, I mean, those are two head on, right? Like, just,
Well, that's
and,
that's part of it. Like you're trying too hard to be too close. Where
yeah,
it's like I think that you have to just take the essence of it,
yes,
and then really, but it takes a brave person to be like, I'm gonna rewrite Harry Potter. I'm
right,
gonna rewrite
right,
something you really love. That's already really successful.
yeah,
But you get
yeah. I
paid
did
really
it.
well. So
I worked with yeah, really, really well. I think, like, I worked with M. Night Shyamalan's production company, Blinding Edge. I did the first movie I ever did as a consultant was Devil, and it was interesting because he did Last Airbinder, and it was I can't remember, it was either he or Ashwin Rajan, who's the president of his company, said something like, no matter what you do, if you take on a giant fan based, well loved series, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right?
he should
Like,
have casted an Asian person in that role though. But
yes, that's true. But
that's the first thing
yeah,
that went wrong in that story,
yeah,
in that project. But sorry.
yeah. But wasn't the kid that played On, wasn't he like a mixie?
I don't think he was.
Oh, he wasn't. So that
I'm
was the
pretty.
deal. He wasn't.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he wasn't.
Okay.
Because if he was Hoppa, then we're okay. I mean, then I don't think there's a problem going. But
Right.
I'm pretty sure he wasn't Hoppa.
Ah.
There's a
Okay.
lot of controversy at the time, but I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
for a fact. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I always thought he was mixed. So I was like, what are they complaining about? But I don't know. I guess I
Yeah.
never went into it. But yeah, I think that's the problem. You attack a piece of, like, Lord of the Rings, right? And like you said, Peter Jackson's got a pair on him to take that on at that scale and then do well. Like, he caught the essence very well. Like,
Yeah.
some of the imagery that he put forward, I thought, like, how did he get into my imagination and pull that out? Because it's exactly how I imagined, certain elements of the movie.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure he was influenced by the same art that we all saw, but still pretty amazing that he was able to do that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I'd love to hear your next piece of advice.
next piece of advice, I guess, would go along to just taking a step back and figuring out and self-actualizing. I know it's a difficult process. You can start off by, like, my 7-year-old, every day we do a reflection of the day. What did you learn today? What is something new that came into your life today? Just a simple reflection, because I think it's very easy to get set in a certain framework and just let life can pass you by, or you can allow it to be so difficult it's hard to see things and the beauty and the value of people in your life, and how fantastic things can be. And that's coming from a standpoint where I've gone through some very difficult times in my life where I was I'd be at points where, like, oh man, I hope I'm at rock bottom because I don't know if I can go any lower.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this isn't rock bottom. I'm not going to make it. And then you start, because you're in that frame of mind, you start thinking of stuff like, you hear things all over, like, oh, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Oh, okay. And that's just all hopeful stuff, right? Like, what context did that even come from? But you start listening to, pieces of advice, you start reading things and self-help and everything. And, everyone's different, everyone's unique, and everyone's situation is unique. But in order to survive that long-term difficulty, at least what I did was I was able to set my mind in, like, appreciating what I had at the time. So at that hardest point in my life, I was appreciating I guess a good metaphor would be if I had one flower, I appreciated the row. I appreciated the bud. I appreciated the stem. I appreciated the flowers and the leaves, right?
Yeah.
And then
I think
because
that's really
that frame.
awesome. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, so go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's a really beautiful metaphor, and I love the idea that that you're grateful and thinking about everything, and I love that idea that that you and your son reflect on the day. I think
Yeah.
I probably should do that with my son, but I don't because we're usually like arguing or something.
Right. Right.
But I do like totally feel you because I think what I like if you listen to podcasts, and this is the advice I always give, but the same advice is to get out of your own head.
Yep.
A lot of times it's like, to me, one of the best ways to get out of depression is to do something for other people,
Mm-hmm.
to help other people, because the moment you help other people, you're no longer thinking about whatever happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future, because you're so focused on doing whatever job you have now. It's like jujitsu. When I get on the mat, I could be angry before I get on the mat, or sad, or thinking about something, and then the moment I get on the mat, I'm just in the moment, because I can't be thinking about how I got screwed because I'm about to get choked
Right.
out, right? I'm gonna get choked out. So I need to like be focused. And then by the end of my practice, it's only like an hour. It's not even that long. It's like an hour. And by the end of practice, I can't, I'm like, well, what was I angry about? What was it that was? And I think it's that getting out of my own head and just really like being like really, really in the moment, And this is one of the reasons why my son and I, we have this, I call it church. And our church on Sundays is we go pick up trash for a couple blocks around the neighborhood.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Because it's like where it's just me and him. We're picking up trash. It's like we're not going to get credit for it anywhere. It's not like we're getting money or recognition or anything, but it's just for us. It's just to like do something for other people, but also help ourselves because we're doing something else. But I'm gonna use the like reflecting, because I do think that's an important and a really important thing for my son to be able to do.
Yeah, I think it's been great for him, and it's been great for me too, because it allows you to figure out like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that today, or maybe we need to read more stories about empathy, or not, what's that fill your bucket book? But I think I like what you said. A lot of it is, you look at it at a sense of perspective, right? Like a lot of people, I think, go through life in this kind of condition where, well, there's a Lieutenant Colonel Marine. His name was, I forget his name now. His last name was Cooper. So, Lieutenant Colonel Cooper, and he came up with this color code of awareness that they teach for in the military and in the police, and that's, white is that like you're comatose, right? And then yellow is you're kind of like watching the awareness that you have when you're watching TV and you're totally zoned out, right? Or you're sitting in the car and you're thinking about a bajillion things and you don't even see the person next to you, right?
Yeah.
And then orange is kind of a little self-aware, you know where you are, you know your surroundings, your peripheral vision is, there's kind of more acute awareness. And then red is kind of like in like fighting mode, like you're totally aware, almost 180%, blown out perspective, where you know what's going on and you're ready to fight, and you're there and present. And then black is like sensory overload, right? And so I think a lot of people go through life in condition yellow, right? Like they're just so much in their head, so much like I've got this to do, I have to buy this. What do we have for dinner? What's big issue is going on at work? And how many people pass through the day and then realize like 2-3 hours have gone by, right?
Yeah.
And then they get in a car accident or fall down or whatever, and they're instantly aware of like, whoa, these things were not important at all. All these things that were super important. How many did somebody like my latest post on Instagram? What are we eating for dinner tonight? None of that stuff matters. Like none of that shit matters, right? What matters is you're alive, your kids are well, right? And the people most important to you are healthy and in your life, and you're doing well, right? You're doing good. And I think that is something that, as a cop, allowed me to see. I grew up pretty sheltered. Racist stuff aside, my parents provided everything I needed: food, shelter, loving home. I went to an all-guys military academy. So, I was like one of 5 non-white dudes, right? So outside of the racist stuff, great education, great upbringing. And then once I became a cop, it was the first time that, to your helping people that aren't in the same situation, it was the first time I saw extreme poverty. And it is horrible. Like you have no idea if you're living in the real world. The real world is hard and ugly, and kids living in filth, a block away from people that live in fantastic condos, right? Like a block can make all the difference in the world. And you see how a lot of people that are in poverty, they're stuck in the cycle where no one told them that you have to wash the dishes on the sink. So there's just it's very common to see like a bunch of pots and pans dirty on the sink and a bunch of garbage and trash everywhere because no one told them that you have to throw that out or you're going to get cockroaches. And there's hordes of cockroaches on the ceiling, and they're sleeping on a mattress on the floor without any sheets and a pillow with no case, and there might be rats, right? But no one has educated them, or they haven't had the opportunity to be educated because they're working their butts off so they don't starve, right? And then they don't have time to focus on their kids where, someone like you and I might be able to read to our children at night or whatever. Well, they're working like 2-3 jobs.
Yeah.
So, and then on top of it, they have people calling on them because their kids aren't being supervised. It's like, when are they supposed to supervise their kids, and when are they supposed to know what can help them and what can, because no one's taking the time to care. And so you go to that, and then you see somebody that they might break a law that they didn't realize was a law. And so, we're talking about the difference between survival and then going out to other parts of the city or, the suburbs. And people have no idea how well they have it.
I love all everything you said, especially the color coding thing reminded me of I did this 1 month backpacking course where I was backpacking for a month, like a lot of it by myself ultimately, like off trail. And I remember the first time I came back, it was I couldn't handle being in the city, any city, because even like a small city, because when you're backpacking, especially by yourself, like you're totally aware of everything going on. Like any sound you turn, because it could, it's not going to be, I'm probably not going to get, but I want to make sure that it's not rocks falling on me or, or like a bear coming up on me.
Yep.
I remember walking through just like, it was like a really small, crappy town we were walking through, and it was overwhelming. And I remember that me and my cohorts had to go back to a hotel room and just sit inside the room with our lights off because there's too many lights, there's too much noise, there's too much movement. And because everything was like, we're like, oh, and it was a lot. And I think it was that time I realized how busy our world, how much movement, how many things we don't notice in the world because we're so used to it. And then the other thing I was going to say was, one of the things I always tell my son, to your point of like, empathy and thinking about other people, is I always tell him that you're an extra in other people's lives. I think we think of ourselves as main characters, right? Like the leads. We are the leads of our life. But like that's only us. To everybody else, we're background people to them. And so I think that having some kind of perspective on who you are and your importance, and realizing like what you are. I think that's really important. Not in a bad way, right? We're still like important people to us and our friends or family, but I think understanding kind of the bigger picture and will help kind of ground the people in ways that are really good, that you can actually help and do things for.
Yes. I like that. I guess that's another piece of advice is that, someone once told me, not everyone thinks like you do. Right. And it's just like, oh shit. Like what? At that point in your life, this was last week, but no, I'm kidding. Like in my 20s, I was just like, oh, I guess that's why they don't understand. Because of course not. Like even people from the same backgrounds or very similar backgrounds still don't necessarily think the way you do, let alone people from completely different backgrounds, right? And I think to piggyback on that is the idea that that's my dog. The idea that not everything is about you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, can you see my 10-pound dog behind looking at us? She's distracted. But that's also a very valuable piece of advice, because I think as males, we're brought up in society to think that the world revolves around us, right? And if it doesn't, make it revolve around you, right? Like I think that's the constant message we're bombarded with is if you're going to be, you know, this whole kind of macho masculine bullshit,
Yeah.
you know, make them like you, make them do what you want. It's like, I think that's the opposite direction we need to go with, right? Like nothing says anything about your man, like not your fortitude, your ability to survive, your ability to fight, your ability to think has nothing to do with making others see that. It has everything to do with more who you are internally. So that's, you know,
I love that. I mean, that's why the one conversation I always have with my wife when my son does boxing and jujitsu, and my wife said, "Oh, why are you teaching him how to fight?" I said, "It's the opposite, because now, like when he goes like when he's 21 and he's at a bar, I'm like, he doesn't need to fight. He doesn't have anything to prove. Like, and I've told my son many times, I'm like, the moment you fight, you've lost, because you know, in a fair fight, you'll kill this guy. And so you should be the man to be like, I don't need to fight. I don't have anything. I mean, short of being attacked, right, or short of something, but you know, like you should be able to walk away. You should de-escalate. You should be able to walk away. If they call you names, you know, at the end of the day that if the fight was a fair fight between you and them, like, you know, like it's not even going to be a thing. And so I think that's like, because so many people who fight are always the guys that don't know how to fight or never actually been in a fight. Like, you know, it's like, I always like, actually, it's funny. I was walking my kid to school one day, or after I dropped him off, I was walking with another dad, and this guy jumped, like they got in like this argument on you know, outside the car or in the cars, and this guy jumps out of the car. He looks like he's gonna fight him, and I'm like, if you get out of the car, you better be ready to fight, you know. Like, and he gets out of the car, and then the other guy gets out, and you could just tell the other guy's like a fighter, and the other guy was like, whoa, like he just started backing away, and like I was like, dude, why would you get out of the car? You know, like, but he's like you know, he just charged the car like he's gonna like kill this dude. I was like, you guys, you know, like you never, because the more you, like when I did jujitsu, you know, I'm not good at jujitsu, but when I do jujitsu, I just realized like I don't want to be in a real fight. I mean, I'm pretty sure I could do well, but I don't want to be in a fight because, like, you know, I know my limitations. You know, I know what, like I know what it could be, and you know.
I think there's a you know, a lot of cops become alcoholics and suffer depression the more years they have on, and I think a lot of that has to do with a couple of things. You know, one, like we were talking about before, because there's such a imbalance of the real world and the luxurious world that everyone else lives in, it's hard to relate to people. Like you're talking about when you're backpacking and you come back to civilization, it's so hard to relate, right? And so you want to be around people that have the similar experience. So they're already shutting themselves off to other perspectives, right? And the people that they should understand the most, because those are the people you're serving. So I think that is a big factor. But I think another big factor is that in order to affect arrest well, you have to be able to have no hesitation in handling people, in grabbing people and being physical with them, because the faster you can get the cuffs on, the faster you can detain them, the less threat they are to you and the less threat you are to them, right? The longer you prolong a situation where you don't have handcuffs on somebody, it can always escalate to the point where you have to shoot them, right? Or you have to use deadly force. And no one wants that. So I think, you know, you see all the bad cops, right? And we've seen all of them on video lately, right? And they always just I mean, look at the last shooting in Kenosha, right? Like, these guys like running around like Keystone Cops, like idiots, chasing a guy with a gun to his back. Like those guys should have never been cops in the first place. Like, what? Why are you using deadly force when you should be using, you know, you should be using hands-on?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I mean, the fact that they let him walk around the car and get in the car and reach into the car. I was like, you should have brought him down before he was even around that car. Just take him to the ground and put his handcuffs, and then you could figure out the situation, right? After that. But he walked all the way around, and he was reaching. I was like, what are you guys doing? You know, like, that's a basic jujitsu move.
Yes, exactly. They need to control and contain immediately, so that you're protecting them. It's not about you. I mean, every cop will say, well, it's about me protecting myself, and okay, to some extent, but really it's about protecting those that you serve. And to do that, you don't let them run around to get to the point. You know, you have to talk about the force continuum. You know, you have to use open hand and closed hand I mean, yes, you can go from just officer presence to having to use deadly force, but you don't want to, and 99% of the time you don't.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you have a bunch of cops that shouldn't be cops. Like they don't know what they're doing. They shouldn't be cops, right? So in that situation, again, you have a large white population. You probably don't have a lot of BIPOCs on that department, right? And so you have all kinds of other issues. But to my point, if you're a good cop, I think you deal so much in handling people and throwing the cuffs on and separating husbands from wives and fathers and mothers from children that you start to feel a sense of depression. Yeah. I think a lot that's the problem is that you are physical with people. And because you're physical with people, the last thing you want to do is get into a fight, especially on your off days, right? Like, you just don't want to get into situations. Like before I met my wife, I was dating a lot of women, and they always, you'd always do the thing like, "Ooh, go get in a fight with." It's just like, oh my gosh, how many women have I dated where they're like instigating a fight because they want to see you, and you're just like, oh, I don't want to be in a crowd. I don't want to be in a fight. I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like it's exactly the same thing. And it's the guys at the bar, you see them talking big and working their courage up. And the second that you see them having to work their courage up, they don't know what they're doing, right? Like absolutely, because no experience whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then it's done when you don't see any remote fighting stance whatsoever, right? Like you see the like the flat-footed, like, and you're just like, oh, here we go. This is gonna, whatever. But I have to admit, as long as no one gets hurt, it's kind of funny to watch two guys slap each other because they've never fought before, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like they don't know how to handle the adrenaline dump, so they're just like they're super slow motion, and they're doing
they're like looks like they're kissing and stuff a lot of times.
Yeah, right.
Like, what are you guys doing? Like, why would you stay so close to somebody? Right. Although, so my son in first grade when he was doing jujitsu, there was a kid from his school that was bullying everybody in the same grade, and he came to my son's class and I remember he wanted to spar with my son because my son's like half his size. Yeah. And so my son just like took him down, put him in a rear naked choke, and then he taps, and then he did it like 8 times to this kid. And after class, I was like, "This is the class bully everyone's scared of." I was like, "He's just bigger than everybody." But the moment you got him in a choke, he tapped because he was scared. Like he doesn't know what he's doing. Like I was like, never be afraid of these people because the only reason he's the bully is because he's bigger than everybody. He does things that other kids aren't willing to do because he's a bully, No, but
isn't that amazing? Like the big guys hardly ever fight because they don't need to, right? Like by their sheer size, you're kind of like, okay, they've grown up just throwing their weight around and maybe shoving somebody, right? Yeah. But when it comes down to it, fights usually with those guys don't last long at all because they just don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to circle. They don't know how to, grab. They're like, why is this guy grabbing my arm? And then also you can see the look on their face like, well, they don't do that in movies. Like, why did this guy grab my arm? Like, I don't, what? And you're just like, okay, now watch this, right? And then, but, it's interesting. I think fighting comes down to, regardless of what style or what techniques you've learned, I think, in my experience, fighting comes down to really who can last the longest.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's really your conditioning, moves, and then half the time luck.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
like
also,
you can.
Well, also I think it's just like what I always tell everybody about fighting is that people aren't like, you could always tell when a person's never been hit before in the face. There's that look, like, oh my God, I got hit in the face by somebody else. Yeah. It usually stops them because they, which is the worst time to stop, right?
Right.
So that's why boxers are so good because they're used to getting hit or they're used to getting out of a hit because that doesn't affect them. Like you hit them, they're going to hit you harder. They're going to knock you out right about now. But so I think that's the thing that like a lot of people like don't understand about fighting is that you're going to get hit and you have to keep going. Like you have to. That's why it's funny when a lot of people talk trash about jujitsu because they're like, you're not hitting. But I'm like, yeah, in practice we're not hitting. But in a real fight, when I'm mounting you, I'm going to be hitting you in the face. In a practice, I'm not hitting the person in the face because we're practicing. But in a real fight, you're going to be hit every single time, and I'm going to be on top of you, and it's not going to be fine. It's not going to be good for you.
Right. No, anyway. Real world people get hurt. Like they don't understand that. Like, I love that you said that because I think people don't realize how your nose hurts when it gets hit. Right. Like the rest of your face, and there's so many capillaries in your face, right? But I think you, after taking so many punches, your cheeks and your jaw and your head, they can become deadened. But if you've had your nose broken a few times, that shit hurts.
Yeah.
Like, and if you've never had it before and you've never had that sensation before, I think it's the ultimate stun, right? And it bleeds so much too. That's the other thing, right? Like, they're stunned. You can see they're like, you can just see they're just like, oh, the brain just shut off. And then the blood comes. And then if they see their own blood, all of a sudden it's like, yep, done. Right? Like, game over.
Yeah,
Here we go. That's usually like it's like that Saving Private Ryan moment, like, oh, stop, time out. Right? Like, it's like, well, we're in the real world now and you wanted to fight. So,
Yeah, there's a famous video that I was watching on YouTube where this older guy was fighting this teen kid for some reason, and the younger kid knew like jujitsu, and he brought him down, and then the older guy taps, and he's like, "What are you doing? This is a fight. You don't tap in a fight." And then he let him go because he wasn't going to break his arm or something. But but it is interesting because even with my son, I'm like, you don't do armbar in a real fight because like you either you're going to break their arm, or like only reason you do is because you're going to break their arm. But if you're not going to break your arm, then don't even get in that position, because like in jiu-jitsu is fine because it's a sport. But the moment that you're in a real situation, you would never do that because there's only one option at that point. There's no tapping, But
I think that's two things you're talking about: people getting out of their cars and fighting and everything nowadays. And I think the difference today is, number one, and I guess this goes to another piece of advice: if you're going to fight, you have to be prepared to take it all the way. Because you don't know the other person's frame of mind, and you have to assume that they are, if they're willing to go all the way, right? And that's, I think, the biggest thing I learned. Like, I was on patrol for 2 years, and I think my second month on patrol, I realized, and this is going to sound bad out of context, but you have these kind of social situations set up in your brain where you have a wall or a limit where naturally, and for good reason, you don't want to hurt another human being. So as much as you want to hit them as hard as you can, or grab them or force them down as hard as you can, there's still this kind of social barrier that doesn't allow you to hurt other people, which is good. But I think if you're going to have a job like being a cop or someone that has to control other human beings, you have to push past that and see them more as objects in those moments. So it's a very delicate balance where you walk into a situation with an open mind. Is there a crime being committed? Yes, there is. I don't know, or I don't know, but I need to effect arrest, right? And then you have to effect arrest. And in that moment that you're effecting arrest, what worked for me was I had to get rid of those social contexts and say, like, this guy's just like a fox, and I have to take him and get the handcuffs on no matter what it takes, right? As quickly as possible. And then the second the handcuffs go on, now we're back to being, as least amount of force as possible, right? Like, ideally, you want to use the least amount of force when you're effecting arrest as possible. But it's such a tough situation when you're fighting someone and they're fighting you, and they're trying to grab your gun, or they're trying to get something out of their pocket. And you don't know if it's a knife or a gun or whatever, or they're trying to gouge your eyes. At that moment, it's get them down, get them cuffed, right? And so you do whatever it takes to get them cuffed. And even though that what I'm saying sounds horrible, like you're treating a human being like an object, in reality, that's the kind of mind frame it takes to get them in those handcuffs, because you're still fighting that instinct not to hurt them, right? Because you don't want to. The reality is you really don't want to. I think, there is, depending on department to department, there is a larger group of cops than we are willing to admit that do not see value in life and that do not care about certain groups of individuals, right? But I think there is another cohort of cops who do value life more than anything, and that's why they became cops, right? But you still have to have those moments of, okay, physically deal with this person, contain them, and then now, okay, what's going on? And I think the majority of the time, regardless of what, I have yet to arrest somebody that wasn't a good person that didn't make bad decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And once you have those handcuffs on and you've searched them and they're totally safe and secure, you're just having a conversation with another person that you haven't met before, right? Or that you've known on paper and you've known through interviewing people around him, and then you've been watching them through surveillance for, months or weeks or whatever, but you still don't know them because you haven't really met them yet, right? So now you have this person that you have all these preconceived notions about, that you have put together, like, okay, they for sure committed, I completely believe beyond a reasonable doubt they have committed these crimes, so now we're going to go arrest them. At that point, you still don't know who they are, right? Really, until you've had that initial contact and conversation and get to know them. And again, even when it comes to homicide, yes, what they did is horrible, it's terrible, but everyone strives to be a good person, right? Unless you're talking a sociopath or psychopath, right? It's totally different, but that's some chemical imbalance. But 99.9% of all human beings are people striving to be, do what they think is good, because no one sees themselves as a bad guy, right? And in their perspective and in their frame of mind, they thought killing this person was a good idea to get them what they wanted, right? Or stealing something from someone else was a good idea. And maybe they didn't even think it was a good idea, but they wanted something else so badly they had to do it. But still, you're still human beings. You still have to talk to them and treat them like human beings, because I don't think there's any other option for society.
I love this advice. What my big worry about, any fights is you don't know if the person's carrying a weapon,
Exactly.
And so you just don't know the situation. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what the situation, and a lot of times it's just not worth it. Like I remember back before before the world went down, I was on a bus in downtown, and it was just me and this lady, and this homeless guy was screaming at this lady, and I was like, I'm only gonna intervene if he touches her. And then finally he lets her go. He stops about it. Then he comes to me and he kind of goes off on me for a while, and he dumps a drink on me. And my younger days, I'd like, oh, this guy's gonna be fucking dead. But as an older guy, I was like, it's not worth it. First of all, he could bite me, and I don't know what he has. I don't know what kind of disease he has. But I just don't want to. It's fine. I'm wet. I'll be okay. I can walk away from this situation. And it took all my guts to walk away from that situation, or all my not guts, courage, inner courage. There you go. So walk away. But it was, it's like one of those things. I don't know. He could have a knife for all. He could have probably. He needs to protect himself, I'm sure. And I just don't want to. I don't want to be in that situation. I don't want to deal with this situation. It's just easier to walk away. And it's, in my younger days, that's not what I would have done.
I always worry about the people that first assessment, you're like, well, who's this person? What? This guy is talking back to me? Yeah. Are you serious? And then those are the ones that should set alarm flags off, right? Because number one, sometimes the people with nothing left to lose don't care because they have nothing left to lose, right? Or two, you look at somebody and you assess them and you're like, this is the last person on earth that you think would fight. Well, that's probably because they have a weapon, right? A lot of people do mouthing, a lot of people that mouth off or are acting crazy, you generally are like, okay, I can see this. They do this all the time. But every now and then you should have warning, signals go up in your brain when something doesn't feel right. Why is this person getting out of their car and so willfully walking up to me?
Yeah.
Right. They've got, there's something going on, right? And this isn't probably going to be a physical fight. They're probably packing, right? So, and today when we have more guns than people, right? And a lot of knuckleheads are wearing them as fashion accessories. It's just not worth it, right? Yeah. This is not 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Fights, aren't fights anymore.
Yeah.
They're encounters. So,
exactly.
And then like you said, is it worth it? No, never.
Yeah. I know it's hard though. It's hard to walk away. It's hard to walk away, but it's the right thing to do.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Guy Code. Really appreciate it. I love your advice. A lot of advice I'd never heard before, so I appreciate that. So everybody who's listening, please rate, review, subscribe to the Guy Code. It's the way we. I mean, it's so dark. I don't know. I got to turn my lights on. So thank you. So thank you again, Morley. Thank you everyone for listening. And again, please rate, review, and subscribe. And have a great night, day, whenever you're listening. Peace out.